In the 2016 NFL season, the Pittsburgh Steelers were 11-5 and were locked into the 3 seed heading into the playoffs. The team was led by their future Hall of Famer in Big Ben Roethlisberger, as well as their superstars in Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. Pittsburgh would make their way to the AFC Championship game, where they'd be throttled by the New England Patriots. That run, all the way back in 2016, was the closest that trio ever got to winning a Super Bowl. Many thought that the Steelers of the mid to late 2010s were a team that was just too good not to win a Super Bowl together eventually. At head coach, you had one of the most respected guys out there in Mike Tomlin, as well as a year in and year out above average and even sometimes top 10 defense. But the superstars were on the offensive end. Roethlisberger, Bell, and Brown were at the top of their game during this time, with Bell and Brown specifically in the top 3 at their respective positions. Yet it never came together for this group, and I'm here to answer why the Steelers, more specifically the Killer Bees trio, never won a Super Bowl. While the trio never won the big one altogether, the same could not be said about Big Ben by himself. Roethlisberger was already a 2-time Super Bowl champion by the time Brown and Bell had joined Pittsburgh, winning in 2005 and in 2008. He was also climbing many of the all-time rankings lists when Pittsburgh selected Antonio Brown in the 6th round of the 2010 draft. And early in his career, Brown was primarily used as a returner, with his most infamous moment to that point coming when he decided to superkick Browns punter Spencer Lanning. AB would kick it into superstardom though in 2013 with 110 receptions, 1 yard shy of 1,500 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns, earning him a Pro Bowl and 2nd team All-Pro honors. 2013 was also the same year that the Steelers would land Le'Veon Bell in the 2nd, thus beginning what many thought could be a long partnership. In Bell's 2nd year, or the 2014 season, the 2nd season of the trio together would be a campaign where reaching the Super Bowl was a legit possibility. In 2014, Ben, Bell, and AB would all earn Pro Bowl nods, with the running back wide receiver duo earning 1st team All-Pro honors themselves. The team would finish 11-5 and would earn the 3 seed. And in the wild card, Baltimore would run away with the win 30-17. Bell unfortunately missed this playoff game due to hyperextending his knee in the season finale the week prior, and his presence was sorely missed as Pittsburgh became one-dimensional. Ben would throw 2 interceptions late in the game that sealed their fate as they set up for Cancun the following week. Given what they were when they were all healthy though, expectations were high for 2015. The team had a 10-6 finish to the season, but again lost Bell, this time halfway through the campaign. Things only got worse though in the wild card against my Bengals during a final sequence that, to be honest, should have never happened if Jeremy Hill hangs onto the ball, but I digress. Pittsburgh was given 30 yards in penalties over 2 horrible decisions by the Bengals. This would lead to a chip shot field goal that would ultimately win them the game, but if you remember, one of those big penalties was a huge hit to Antonio Brown by Vontaze Burfict. And without their 2 superstars in the divisional, they'd fall to Denver 23-16. Another season ruined by injury. 2016 was the season we briefly touched in the intro. Pittsburgh's big 3 were at their best, each of them earning a Pro Bowl, with Bell earning 2nd team All-Pro and Brown 1st team. They easily took care of Miami before barely squeaking by the Alex Smith-led Chiefs. Brown and Ben held their own, but the star of the first 2 playoff games was Le'Veon Bell. He had 167 yards and a pair of touchdowns against the Dolphins, then another 170 against the Chiefs. But it was late in that game that he'd suffer a groin injury that would hinder him against New England in the AFC Championship game. Bell was a non-factor, and while Brown and Ben did what they could, since there was no run game and playoff Tom was a different breed, they were no match as they'd lose by 3 possessions. And this leads us to 2017. This is the year where it truly felt like it was now or never. Bell was placed on the franchise tag for the first time, a label he certainly did not appreciate. Ben still had a few good years left, and the O-line just finished a season in 2016 where they ranked 3rd in the league per PFF.com. In the 2017 draft, they'd grab not only a solid piece at the time in Juju Smith-Schuster, but they would also grab their defensive anchor to this day in T.J. Watt. They were low-key a stacked team. Beginning the season, it wasn't the best start at 3-2 after just 5 games, including a surprising beatdown at the hands of the Jaguars. The Steelers, however, would rally and would go on an 8-game winning streak where they'd ultimately finish 13-3. Brown would lead the league with 1,533 receiving yards on 101 catches and 9 touchdowns. Bell would rush for nearly 1,300 yards of his own, rush for 9 touchdowns, and catch 85 passes for another 655 yards and another 2 receiving touchdowns. Big Ben did have a good year with 28 touchdowns and throwing for over 4,200 passing yards, although he did also toss 14 interceptions. All 3 would earn a Pro Bowl nod yet again, with AB and Bell earning yet another first-team All-Pro honors. The team would earn the 2 seed, skipping straight into the divisional round, and in the divisional they would face a familiar foe in the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, as we just mentioned, kicked Pittsburgh's ass back in week 5. While yes, they were embarrassed once, I do believe they still overlooked this inexperienced team. This would come back to bite them in the Big Balboskis, as Bortles for this matchup was like Joe Montana. Alright, maybe more like Trent Dilfer. They just flat out made the right plays when they needed to and took advantage of costly turnovers that resulted in a huge 45-42 upset win. Bell was alright on the ground, but was still a huge contributor in the pass game. Brown had a pair of touchdowns and had over 130 yards. The star of the team, however, was Big Ben, who had nearly 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. But the defense was the biggest liability of the game, and just like that, the Killer Bees era was over. If you guys recall, Bell was not a fan of being placed on the tag for 2017, yet they tried to do that again, but he was not having it this time around. The divisional game turned out to be Bell's final game in a Pittsburgh uniform, as he would refuse to play, and with neither side giving in, he would ultimately miss the entirety of 2018 and would seek free agency for 2019 and beyond. 2018 would be good. Ben would lead the league in passing yards and interceptions, while AB led the league in receiving touchdowns, but the team would finish 9-6-1 and would ultimately miss the playoffs. After the season, another of the Killer Bees would depart, again in a controversial way. Despite the great season, Antonio Brown would clash with his quarterback throughout the entirety of the campaign, which culminated in him missing practices and being benched for the final regular season game. He would request a trade shortly thereafter and be dealt to the Raiders. And then there was only one. Big Ben Roethlisberger. He'd injure his elbow, which made him miss all but 2 games in 2019, and he'd have a resurgence in the first half of 2020 before his body would ultimately give up on him and the team would take a nosedive after an 11-0 start. 2021 would essentially be his swan song final farewell season. As far as how the other 2 careers ended, well, Bell would join the Jets in 2019, but the year off would show as he could not shake off the rust nor get off social media. In 2020, after a loss to the Cardinals, Bell would go on Twitter to suggest the Jets trade him. He'd ultimately be cut and sign with Kansas City, but he was essentially a non-factor. He joined Baltimore's practice squad in 2021, get cut midway before joining Tampa Bay, and even reunited briefly with Antonio Brown, but once that wrapped up, he'd be cut and would never sign with an NFL team again. Now, Antonio Brown is a whole nother story. Honestly, he deserves his own video. Say what you want, but at the very least, he sure as hell had a memorable time in Oakland, even though he'd never actually play a snap for the team. I'm sure you guys have heard this more than once, so I'll just briefly go over it. AB would accidentally freeze his feet to the point of frostbite and would miss training camp as a result. He'd then complain about the helmet he wanted to use, even filed a grievance for it, called the GM a cracker, threatened to hit the GM before being held back by Vontaze Burfict of all people, then asked for his release when his guaranteed money was voided. That was all in the span of a few months. He'd signed with New England for a few games before off-the-field issues forced the Pats to cut him. In 2020, he'd signed with Tampa and win a Super Bowl with Brady before crashing out again when he left in the middle of a game, thus ending his NFL career. Long story short, the trio failed for a few reasons, but I believe the biggest one was simply that they couldn't ever remain healthy enough to make an impact in January. Bell specifically was hurt for the start of the 2014 playoffs, most of 2015, and deep in the 2016 playoffs. Brown was knocked out of a wildcard game in 2015 with a concussion, and then finally they'd be just let down by their defense in 2017 before the trio ultimately split up. 2018 and beyond, you never know what could have happened, but personalities, maybe some ego, a dash of CTE contributed to the locker room falling apart. While a Super Bowl was never won with probably the best trio in all of the 2010s decade, in the 5 seasons that they played together, they combined for 12 Pro Bowl selections, 6 first-team All-Pro honors, 2 second teams, 2 divisional titles, and 4 trips to the playoffs. Funny enough, all 3 also either retired or were out of the league after the 2021 season. So, they were kind of together in the end after all. Had they kept together for a longer period of time, who knows what they might have been able to do, but that's another story. Today, Big Ben does comment about the NFL from time to time, and even recently sparked some controversy when he claimed Aaron Rodgers in his prime was better than Patrick Mahomes. Le'Veon Bell's rumored to potentially return to the Steelers somehow, some way, alongside Aaron Rodgers, although I think that's just rumors. I don't think that's going to happen. But the latest thing that happened to him, from off the top of my head, I think he got knocked out in boxing, so there's that. And Antonio Brown, he is facing legal issues with an attempted murder charge and fled the country, but he's still posting on Twitter, so there's that. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Had they kept it together for another few seasons, maybe 2018, 2019, 2020, how far do you think the Killer Bees could have actually made it? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Triple DS. Thank you as always to Wes Most. He's the only member I have on my channel. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching. Love you guys. Shaboy!